I think this could be our gang for tonight. Thanks for coming to what has become Beanbag. We'd hoped it was going to be a This Is Us, but it wasn't possible. So this is Plan B. It's Beanbag, and I thought for your benefit tonight that I would share a little bit of my story. I'm hoping to share 12 people that I've met, and they've influenced me and changed my life in some way. That's the plan. I didn't have a lot of time to think this up, but that's the hope this afternoon that I was thinking about, and that's what we're going to do this evening. So we're always giving you the chance to be arty or crafty or to reflect whilst something is happening. And so I'm going to share a piece of music and say that whilst I'm sharing the people that are important to me, you might be thinking about the important people in your life. And so this might set us off on the right track. It's a version of The Lord's My Shepherd. And I just thought it was rather lovely, and it's got some reminiscing involved.
My shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name. I shall not want.
So I share that because it's a beautiful way to start. It's a lovely version of The Lord's My Shepherd, reminiscences and the journey of life and the photos that we discover and the stories that we find and the partnerships that we make. And I suppose that's the journey that I'll take you on. They're my stories, they're my people, but you might be thinking about your stories and your people whilst I do this. And if you wish, you can write some of those things down, or just in a natural way reflect about them in this at the same time. So I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint, and in the PowerPoint there are some photos, and there'll be some stories alongside the photos, and there'll be some couple of songs that will play in between just to break it up as we go through the hour. But we're thinking about the people that you meet and how it changes your life. And I'll say at the beginning that this was a little bit with hearing my dad tell his story the last couple of times we've met at Beanbag, and particularly how the second time, as we discussed it, we thought that might be a good way for him to tell some of his stories. And he told some very poignant stories about some of the people that he met. I cannot compete with these things. As Lindsay said to me at the dinner table, but Stuart, you haven't got an OBE, nor have you met the First Minister. So I'm not going to in any way try and compete with these things, nor have I lived a very long life thus far. But the life that I've lived, I'll share with you just here. So starting somewhere at the age of 4, and at I've got a story that heads into things at about primary 1. Although in England, as my dad was sharing with you, I was born in Cheltenham, and by this stage I'm in St Albans, or at least a place very near it, just north of London. And the first person, I suppose, that has changed my life is my big brother, Kenneth, who's 3-4 years older than me. And at his wedding, I gave a speech where I explained to everybody that my brother never let me win. And I suppose that's always been our relationship. He's been my big brother, and big brothers win. And that was the theme of the wedding speech. And at the end of it, I challenged him to a race, and we raced around the top table in our kilts and our dress shoes. And of course, he had to let me win, otherwise he'd have been booed on his wedding day. And that was the cunning plot. And yet that wedding speech was written on the morning of the wedding, and because I really didn't know what to say as best man, and I hadn't prepared very well, and so I co-wrote the wedding speech with my brother, and he helped me come up with that plan. And so we have always been close. We've always worked together, but we've always had a competitive friendship and brotherhood. The story comes at age 5, climbing the tree at the local primary school. There was a tree that everybody climbed, and it was a brilliant climbing tree, and you would climb clockwise through it, from left to right, up and through the branches and down the other side. Everybody did it. It was great fun. One day I tried going anti-clockwise, and I got stuck in the tree. Various staff and friends tried to unstick me and get me out. My brother was called for across the school grounds. He was on another terrific tree that was the Star Trek tree. I'm sure you can imagine it, Andy. It was very low to the ground. It had many, many places for people to operate the spaceship from. And he had to leave the Starship tree to come to my silly tree in the wee playground. And there was his little brother with his head stuck in the tree. And the janitor had to lop a branch off, a significant branch, so much so that the tree was never the same again. And this was in order to free his little brother. And he was mortified that I would be ruining one of the famous climbing trees at his local primary school. I'm sure he's got over it in time, but that's where we start our story. My brother, a big influence in my life, somebody I'm still obviously very close to, and he's a minister in Newcastle and has his own church there, and we compare notes regularly. Let me share a story from when I'm a little bit older. I'm 10 years old here or thereabouts, and I'm in a Scripture Union camp. I've been sent away in the month of August for the last week of the summer holidays. I'm in a field in Ballater, in Royal Deeside, where the Queen will be holidaying nearby, and where we'll probably head into Ballater, and there'll be some sort of exciting thing that happens in the course of the week, where the Queen will be present, and there'll be sweets given out and fireworks going off. And it was a lovely time to go there, because I seem to go to that Scripture Union camp year after year after year. I remember the camp leader, Eddie McKenna. He's the second person to introduce you to. And at that stage, he wasn't a Church of Scotland minister yet, but he would be in years to come. He would have been a young man, I suppose, and for me, he seemed very, very old and very, very wise. And he took the talks, and he talked about Jesus, and he talked about faith, and there was the first sort of real inkling of a faith in me whilst I grew up in a Christian household. It was these times at Scripture Union camp where I think my faith developed, and I had some sense of commitment to God as I looked up at the stars and thought how they were placed there, and thought of myself and how small I was in that big Scripture Union camp field. Everything was under canvas at Ballater, and Eddie McKenna was famous for having a car and a caravan on site. Everyone was under canvas except for Eddie. He was in his caravan, and his red Ford Escort was very fancy at the time. It was quite the thing, and he had curly hair, and he would blow dry his hair in his car by turning the engine on and getting the fan going, and he would blow dry his hair, and the leaders would have great fun taking his car and placing it inside the big marquee tent, because it always seemed to be Eddie's birthday, and even if it wasn't Eddie's birthday, they would just do it anyway and pretend it was his birthday, and these were great fun experiences. At the same camp, I remember meeting Sitch, and Sitch doesn't even count in one of my 12 people, but I remember meeting Sitch, and he must have been a 20-year-old student who was there as a leader at the camp, and we went to this famous jumping point from a bridge on the River Dee, and we would go to this steel bridge, suspension bridge. You've seen the kind, painted white, and over the very cold waters of the Dee rushing underneath. And we stood on that bridge, and we decided whether we were going to jump in the water, which was a good, 5-meter drop, and was quite a big deal for a boy this age that you see in front of you. And I remember Sitch, the leader, standing up on the balustrade and holding on and shivering, and he seemed to be very nervous. And so some of us went up to him and said, "It's going to be okay. You don't have to do it. I know some of us have done it, but you don't have to do it. You're a leader. You're okay. It'll be fine if you just want to get down, Sitch." And he said that he was very nervous, but he was going to give it a shot. He then proceeded to do this dive with twist and roll, and he plunged into the water with great aplomb, and we were just amazed at this guy because he was so cool. Influences like that came at Scripture Union Camp, and we learned a lot, I'm sure, about ourselves and about what it was to be a Christian and how to live together in that context. I'm going a little bit out of sequence here, and this is the difficulty of being nearly 47 years of age. And some of you will know this difficulty. It means that some of your life isn't documented. And this part of my life that I'm struggling with here is really that when I'm 16 and 17 years of age. So I'm having to give you a picture of me playing cricket somewhat older, and probably 30 years of age here playing cricket. And at the very end of my career, I would suggest. But I played a lot of sport at school. And I remember very much the teacher who came to our school quite late on, and in my 4th, 5th and 6th year, Tom Mingus would offer me the chance to play hockey in his hockey team. He had a hockey team in Clydesdale, called Clydesdale, and they were south side of Glasgow, and that was a big adventure for me. He would pick me up from my house, take me across town, and I would play hockey for the men's hockey club at Clydesdale. And I was really, looking back, I'm really moved by the fact that he bothered to give me that time. And as we would drive across town, we would chat. And as a teacher, to get to know a teacher in that way was a very special thing. And I remember to my mortification, playing against him in a bounce game because the game had been called off, and he went in goals, and he didn't have all the kit on, but he was just sort of filling in as a kicking back in field hockey. And I remember being the enthusiastic young man that I was, bursting into the D, smashing the ball as hard as I could at my teacher, and it hitting him firmly in the chest, and pushing him over the line and going in, and me cheering because it was a goal. And obviously later realizing that it had hurt him quite badly as we drove home together and he dropped me off. That's a tale I shouldn't be telling you, but that's life. The things that you do and you're ashamed of. But I'm showing you a picture of cricket, and so I have to talk about the fact that I grew up playing a lot of cricket, like Jim, and we just loved our sport. And this was at my local cricket pitch, and I remember the adults and the older boys, and the fact that you could speak to them like you were a real person, and somehow they treated you like a real person too. And it was a practice ground for being an adult, for discovering who I was, and the part I could play in the world. And I remember Colin Dawson running the juniors cricket side, and how we played in his team, the second 11, and he would always give us opportunities to shine and be our best. And it was a lovely way to learn and to grow. Let me show you another picture. I'm at Student Dundee University. I'm in Airlie Halls, which was a street totally at the centre of campus. It's all offices now. They thought it was too good for the students, so they chucked the students out in years that followed. But they were just big houses, and we would take these rooms in them, and I shared with a guy called Bill, who I'm still in touch with. But the person I want to introduce you to is right at the top, and it's Robin, and he's there in a light blue sweatshirt, and he was an architect, or at least he was finishing his studies, and Robin was married, shock horror, at the end of his student years, because being an architect took so long, that he married his girlfriend Julie, and he was part of my Bible study group in the halls, and this was the Bible study group. Gillian was the leader, and she's in the middle, with someone with their hands on her shoulders, and it was an amazing group of people. I still can remember almost all of their names, even although it was 29 years ago now. And in terms of finding out who we were, we'd just all left home. We'd found ourselves in this strange world called Dundee, studying different things, and we learned an awful lot from each other. And I think I learned a lot that year. But I loved the fact that Robin and Julie invited us, not just they were part of our Bible study group, but they invited us into their home in Dundee as a married couple. And they shared a bit of their lives with us. And they had a car, and they had all of these things, and they seemed so grown up. And those people make a huge influence, I think, in your life when they open themselves up to you. So I remember Robin and Julie. I remember breaking my arm at university, one of my arm breaks, playing volleyball, and I remember Robin driving me to the hospital to get fixed up. And it seemed that, Robin and Julie were always there, like a big mum and dad figure for me at university in my first couple of years. Right. Just to show you me at Land's End, going on adventures as a student. The hair is starting to get almost that long. You know, there was no lockdown excuse, but that was just the idea of how long can you grow your hair? I mean, that's probably something that you do as a student. And this was me with my good friends having a summer holiday in Cornwall. No story to tell really of that one. Let's see. I wanted to play you a song. I've told you, I think, about this person before. He's not a person really I can introduce you to as a friend of mine or somebody I know, but I did go to a gig with him. And I suppose it's thinking of those student years, the gigs, the music, the fun that we had. And this person is called Foy Vance. He's Northern Irish. He's a singer-songwriter. And to launch his album a couple of years back, he said that he would go to any pub or venue. You just needed to give him a call. And so he ended up playing this tiny little pub in North Berwick. And I went through with my friend and we piled into this pub, and there must have been 50 people in there. There was no space to breathe. And we didn't know where he was or what was going to happen. And then suddenly he picked up the guitar and started singing and playing. And we all just sat down on the floor in the pub. You know, we had this agreement, this whisper went round, let's just sit down. And we all sat down. And it was the most amazing, intimate gig you've had. I can't show you that gig, but let me see what I can show you.
When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Sing it out now, come on. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Sing that loud, sing that proud. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. All right. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Take it over, Belfast. Go on. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Whatever light leads you, man, leads you on. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Guide me on, guide me strong. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light. Whatever light leads you, man, leads you on. When I need to Last time, come on. When I need to get home, you're my guiding light. You're my guiding light.
Imagine that. Imagine being able to go to a gig and to have that sense of connection with people. It would be incomplete of me to say that my student years weren't hugely influential to me in terms of my Christian faith. They were absolutely profound, and going away from home, having to think about the things that I had been taught and grown up with, and to claim them as my own, that was a hugely important part of my life. Being part of that Bible study group in halls, sharing my thoughts with these people, reading the Bible closely, listening to what God was telling me, choosing to stay on a second year in that same halls, taking on the job of leadership of the Bible study the following year. People saying to me, Stuart, you seem to be good at this. You might want to consider being a minister one day, and me starting to think in those ways, and meeting all sorts of people from all around the country, and having that experience of being in a different church family, of joining the Baptist church, of meeting other people my age and stage and people older and wiser than me. All of that was hugely important in shaping me and who I became. That's who I became. I left university and needed to find work. I thought that teaching was the thing to do. I don't regret that for one heartbeat. I think it's just a wonderful profession. I became a geography teacher for 4 years in Edinburgh. And it was the chaplain of the school, for the school had its own chaplain, who took this photograph in the grounds. And that was part of his duties, was to take a photograph and to welcome you as new staff in the school. But the people I want to introduce you to or tell you a quick story about, one would be Michael Bryce. He was known only as Brycey, and he was my boss. He was my head of department in the geography department. He was a proper geographer, and he knew everything you would ever want to know about geography. And I felt a little bit wet round the ears, and I felt like I didn't know very much, and I felt like I needed to wear tweed just to make sure that the pupils knew that I was the teacher, not the pupil. And I was fighting every day to be in control of my classroom and trying to impart some knowledge to these young people. But Michael Bryce was such a kind and good leader and a good boss. He opened up his filing cabinet to me. He said, all of these resources, they're yours if you need them, Stuart. And so I would be able to work out how I was going to teach glaciation, volcanoes, Japan, whatever it might be, from his years of experience in teaching geography. The other person that gave me such a hand up in teaching was Mike Allingham, who was the Scottish cricket captain at the time and had played rugby at a very high level. And he taught me everything he knew in taking sports teams. And I started with the under-15s teams and ended up taking the cricket first 11 and the hockey first 11, and learned absolutely everything as he showed me the ropes, and was just so generous in giving his time and his experience to me. And I learned quickly in those 4 years what it took to be a teacher. And I think probably 4 years in, I had some idea of what it was to be a teacher. And that was the time where I handed in my notice and said that there's another thing that I need to be doing. And it was in my interview at the school that I spoke at first. The rector of the school said, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Stuart?" Or at least something like that in the interview. And I said that I was excited about being a teacher, but I really had hopes to be a parish minister. And that was maybe a careless thing to say at an interview when you're looking to hold down a job for a period of time. But he heard me. And when it came 4 years later, and I said, I'm looking to become parish minister, he very kindly said, do you want to stay on in Edinburgh? You can stay on in the school. You can do your training at Edinburgh University. We'll make it all possible. But for Lindsay and I, we were then married. We decided that it was back to Glasgow that we needed to go, and to our roots. So that's that story, that chapter of the life. I became a hockey coach, not just for that period of my life, but also when I was training in ministry. I would coach hockey morning, noon, and night, or at least it felt that way. That's me giving the team talk. That's us at halftime, almost undoubtedly losing. That's me telling them that they're probably not going to lose. It's going to be okay. Chin up, and all the other cliches you can think of. I'm in my skip cap, just by the goalpost there. I found this photo on Facebook, or at least it was shared, quite alarmingly. And this is my university group, which is a strange experience for me, to look back on these years. It felt like a long time ago, and it was. And everybody was from different year groups, and you would occasionally be in classes with each other, but it wasn't necessarily a coherent group where you were all, classmates. But there'd be some people in there that I would know really well and got on with really well. But I want to say something about two of my bishops, if you like, two of my supervisors in my time learning to be a minister. And one of them is Malcolm Cuthbertson, who was the minister in Easterhouse. And I did a placement with him because they felt that I was too posh and I needed to be roughed up, so I got sent to Easterhouse, and that's probably reasonable. And Malcolm Cuthbertson, in this little hall church with about 20 folks coming on Sundays, taught me a great deal about ministry and how you related to people and how you met them at their level. And I listened to his sermons, and he said, sermons, Stuart, are not about you telling them what you know. They're not academic lessons. They are to be inspirational. They're to get people through their week, because their week is hard enough. And what you need to do is help them meet with God, let God touch their lives, that they might know something of him. And that will be what gets them through the week, Stuart, not your wonderful knowledge of what you've been learning and reading about at Glasgow University. I took that to heart. I thought that was wise, and I still think it's wise. I had another supervisor called Alistair Cherry, who I learned a huge amount from. He was a minister that was just starting a new charge in Pennylee, and so he was introducing himself to everybody, and it was fascinating seeing that. He'd just lost his wife, and he felt he needed to leave his previous charge and make a new start. And so he came very much as a grieving man, as a broken man, and he was so honest, both with me as his student, but also with the congregation. And I saw how people were drawn to him, and I saw how he could become, like Henry Newen wrote about, the wounded healer, like Jesus was the wounded healer to this group of people in Pennylee. And they were drawn around his ministry, and they became a team. And I saw something of what ministry could be, and I thought, I need to find myself a parish like Pennylee. Let me introduce you to Stuart Matthews, and the idea that parenthood cannot but change you forever. And here we have Finley obviously as a newborn. We're in the Queen Mums, and I've got my hands on a wee baby, and the very idea that you've been trusted with this life, and it's your job and duty to care for them and to make sure they're okay. It's an awesome responsibility, a huge learning experience, and a wonderful gift. And as a minister now, when people bring their children to me and they say, will you baptize my child? I don't question them deeply on their faith or their perspective. I do ask these questions, but I'm so appreciative of where they're at. They've just realized that they've been given this gift, that this can only be a gift from God. And they've come to the church and they want to ask God's blessing on the baby. And I think being a father myself, I get that. And yeah, there can be no bigger experience than holding a firstborn child. Not quite in chronological order here. Lindsay, on our wedding day, Lindsay says, oh no. Lindsay is holding up a shoe pastry swan, everybody. You can just about see the swan. This was part of the wedding breakfast. They call it a breakfast, don't they? And it was being held, the wedding breakfast, at Kilmerdinny House, which is about a stone's throw from where I speak to you from, in Bearsdown. And obviously, marriage changes one's life, and I could say too much about Lindsay and her influence on me and that part of the journey. So what I'll do is I'll play you a song just to let you know a little bit more about what being married's about.
Ever since the day that we first met, God created love that He had kept. And now that I commit to you my life, and we can only love each other more and more in time. You are loved, and nothing's gonna change that. I will love you till we're old and grey, and I'll love you when we're young. Don't be scared, it's alright. God has given us this love, and He will never let it fall apart. He will never leave our side. Every time you look into my eyes, I can see the passion you've acquired, because everything you do with love. And every day you make me feel inspired to ignite. You are loved, and nothing's gonna change that. I will love you till we're old and grey, and I'll love you when we're young. Don't be scared, it's alright. God has given us this love, and He will never let it fall apart. He will never leave our side. And I'm falling more in love with you. I'm falling more in love with you. I'm falling more in love with you every time we close our eyes and we dream of life. And together we'll die. You are loved, and nothing's gonna change that. I will love you till we're old and grey, and I'll love you when we're young. Don't be scared, it's alright. God has given us this love and He will never let it fall apart. He will never leave our side. You are loved, you are loved, and nothing's gonna change that. I will love you till we're old and grey, and I'll love you when we're young. Don't be scared, it's alright. God has given us this love and He will never let it fall apart. He will never leave our side.
Okay, where next? Where can we possibly come next? Here we are. We've arrived in Maryhill Parish Church. I guess where we are, we're just outside the front wall, and I meet two people, Anthony J.D. Craig and James Hamilton. And they both obviously feature strongly in the next chapter of the story. Anthony firstly took me on as a student, and Anthony, the story I suppose I'd want to say, and I know you're in the room, is that you gave me such an opportunity to experience parish ministry that was really fundamental in shaping the parish minister that I would become. And this was all, I'm thinking only of the first 15 months really of the placement. And as I neared the end of my time, and where some of my colleagues were starting to drift out of their placements and head on to other things, Anthony gave me the opportunity to take the full weight of the parish ministry. We said, let's talk to the undertakers and say that every funeral will come to you, Stuart. And I was delighted. You might think I'd be horrified. I was delighted at the idea of it. And the opportunities that Anthony gave me to really experience what it was to be a parish minister in Maryhill. And whilst my fellow students were saying, "Have you done a funeral yet?" I've done one, you know, and I was able to reply that I had done nearly 30 funerals, I think, in my student probationary year, alongside Anthony and Jim too. And so the influence and the gift that Anthony gave me was to really experience that in those first 15 months. And then as the time grew on, and usually that would be the exit for a student, it became a possibility, and Anthony was gracious enough to be open to it, that I could stay on and become an associate. And continue in ministry and continue to learn and to grow alongside him and Jim in the team ministry. And being part of a team ministry, I think, is hugely important to the minister that I've become and the person that I am. Let me say something about Jim. Jim was unwell for a period of time, and Anthony will know what he was unwell with, but I can't remember. But he was in hospital for maybe, he wasn't in for that long, but he was out for 3 months or so with a hospital stay and then a recovery. And I remember this probably was quite early on as me as associate. But by then, Jim had introduced me to everybody and everything in Maryhill, along with Anthony, but Jim was in the schools and was so well known. And so Jim was out for 3 months. I became Jim. And I started doing the rugby clubs. I started doing all the things that Jim would have done out and about in the community because I'd been introduced. I'd had the initial, "Hello, this is Stuart. He'll be working with us." And so I just hit the ground running. I got to know everybody and everything. And really, it was the most amazing introduction to ministry, having colleagues like Anthony and Jim. I'm still confused by the photo and how Anthony could possibly be shorter than Jim. I don't know how that works. Is it squinty or something? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's a huge part of the story. The next part of the story, I struggled to find a photo. I wanted to say something about Martin Johnson and how he had been the person that was in charge of all the churches across Scotland that were in poorer communities. We call them the priority areas. And it's a network of churches and a network of support where you could share what it was you were about in your community and hear a little bit about what was going on there. So you can imagine all the Easterhouse churches and the Castlemilk churches and the churches from Edinburgh or from Ayrshire, and all of them getting together at various times. And Martin Johnson held that work together amazingly with such vision and with such humility. And he was a really important person in my growth and my understanding of the church that was bigger than Maryhill. And we learned an awful lot in those experiences, and I know that Anthony and Jim did too. But my picture is obviously at Pitlochry and our trips there, and the times that we shared, and the people in the room, and some of these people no longer with us. So there's a sadness looking at this photo, and yet there's such a lot of warmth and happiness as the family was together and we were learning how to bake or make or create. Jenny Ann did 2 wonderful workshops year after year. I think we were doing cake making this one rather than bread making. I think bread making was the first one, and then it became cake making. And we had terrific times together and great stories to share. And it was that sense of family. Is Maryhill Parish Church, and then this wider sense of family in the priority areas that has been hugely important to me, and I think is something that I really want to hang on to in ministry and in understanding who we are as the church in Maryhill. We're getting near the end. I know I'm running on, but I hope you're still with me. Let me introduce Sheila Ramsey to you. The story I'd like to tell of Sheila is of her arrival, her sitting down with myself and Jim, and us having a sort of interview, an informal interview. We've been told that there was this lady in Drumchapel. Her position there had come to an end, and therefore she was being offered as a free resource, somebody that could come alongside us in Maryhill and work with us. And this was a scary proposition at the very least, because she was American and she was female. And this was a shock for both Jim and myself. And so she came into this interview and she told us a little bit about herself, and she managed to put us at ease in that hour that we spent together. And then, of course, we had 3 years of learning from Sheila's get up and go, her willingness to try new things. And the things that I've learned from her are obvious. And they stay with me today, giving things a go, having a try, and putting your best foot forward. They could be things that would be described as coming from California or America, but certainly Sheila lived those characteristics out, and she's now doing that in her own parish in Wyoming, and I'm very proud to say that that was part of her journey, being with us in Maryhill. Let me say that this is in Renfield St Stephen's. This is at a workshop about art and worship, and this is where, it's not where I met Peter Gardner, but it's where I really came across his work and what he was doing with his wife Heidi. And he opened up his portfolio to us and said, here's some of the things we've been doing at Renfield. They might work where you are, who knows? And I thought to myself, no, it'll never work in Maryhill, surely not, no way. And yet over the last 5 years or so, we've dipped our toe in the water and we've tried a few things that are creative, things that try and take us out of our comfort zone in terms of being the Church of Scotland, where we listen to the word and we go away and we hope that we are changed. But what would happen if we brought a little bit of our God-given creativity and we started to shape worship around that from time to time, and made things and tried to find meaning in what we made? And we talked about our feelings a bit more. what would that look like? And I think you'll agree it's been an interesting journey so far, and Peter Gardner has been a great friend and guide in that journey so far. The last person or people I'll introduce you to is, of course, all of you. How else could I end? But it's the Zoom room, which signifies the last year of the journey. I'm nearly 47 years of age, and it's been a year like no other. And we have learned an awful lot about each other. I've had to learn an awful lot about how to try and lead and guide and walk alongside you all. But I've learned an awful lot more from you, which has always been the case, and I think will always be the case in church life and in a life of faith. We journey together, we share together, we learn from God together, and we grow together. But let me share with you a song, You're Gonna Be Okay.
I know it's all you've got to just be strong, and it's a fight just to keep it together. I know you think that you are too far gone, but hope is never lost. Hope is never lost. Hold on, don't let go. Hey, hold on, don't let go. Just stay one step closer, put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. I know your heart is heavy from those nights, but just remember that you are a fighter, a fighter. You never know just what tomorrow holds, and you're stronger than you know. You're stronger than you know. Hold on, don't let go. Hey, hold on, don't let go. Just stay one step closer, put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. One step closer, put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. And when the night is closing, don't give up and don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up and don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay.
I shared that with the pupils at Cadder Primary. It was the last day of school before lockdown, and I got the chance to go in and share with them. And they just sort of, I sat on the floor, and there was about 80 of them left in the school. It was just the remnant, and they just let me have the whole morning to play songs and to talk with them. And I played them that song, and I hoped it meant something to them. And it's been, I think, special and significant over the last year.